Hello everybody, and welcome to my basic tutorial of JavaScript. Here I will be demonstrating the use of a number of various JavaScript features, specifically the new functions introduced in the ES6 update that allow for additional means of manipulation of arrays, the use of the custom user-made Voca library that will also add a whole lot more options as far as string manipulation, and I'm also going to demonstrate recursive functions here. I'm using the Node extension for JavaScript so that I can write all this code here in Visual Studio Code and then have it just output down here in the terminal. So the first thing we're going to do is run it. Okay, took 0.208 seconds. Nice. So now we're going to walk through this output while also analyzing various things I have typed in here to get it to be this way. So for starters, right here, just like in Python and in C++, if you're going to include any libraries that are outside of just what's found in the vanilla language itself, you of course have to call it. Now, in JavaScript, I had to do this by saving it to a variable. So that variable is now called v. So there I've called the Voca library, and we'll come back to that one later. So now we're going to start off with arrays. So the first thing I did here was create an array right here that lists all numbers between -5 and +5. So down here in the terminal, I have it outputted the entire array just right here. All numbers from -5 to +5 listed in the order that they were listed when I initially declared the array. And we're saving the array to the variable r so that we can come back to it later or use it later. And right here, I've called it so that I can output it down here. In JavaScript, this right here is basically your print statement, console.log, and then just whatever's in parentheses. I personally don't know if this is supposed to be like the traditional print statement for JavaScript, or if that's just how Node wants me to do it. For those of you who aren't aware, JavaScript is primarily used for website design and things like that, so it's not common that you find JavaScript code just outputted in a terminal, but that's what we're doing here. So I'm going to use console.log right here for basically every one of my print statements, which is how we have all this stuff in the terminal that I can use to show you how all this works. So the first thing we're going to do with this array is use the find function, which, as I stated before, is one of the many functions introduced in ES6. And this function will essentially find, it'll iterate through the array and then output whichever element ends up fulfilling the criteria for when you call the function. So right here I have find, the entire function just saved here as the variable check1. And then down here I have the check1 variable called. And it outputs down here, right here. So the parameter I had before it was return element less than 0. So it's going to return the first element it comes across that's less than 0. And in the case of this array, that happens to be -5. In my next test for a check2, this variable, I have it altered so that instead it outputs the first element and finds that's greater than 0, which, according to the output of me calling check2 right here, turns out to be +1. Notice why it chooses to output these. And the reason why is because it iterates through the entire array in a linear format, starting from the beginning and going to end. So with the parameter of first element that's less than 0, the first thing it's going to come across is -5, because that's what's at the beginning of our array. And when it comes to greater than 0, it's going to iterate through -5, -4, -3, all the way up until it hits +1, because that's the first number that's greater than 0. And so right here it outputs 1. So that's find. Now we're going to move on to every, which is a function that essentially returns the Boolean true or false value if the condition put forth ends up being true for all variables within the array, or all elements, I should say. And so in this case, I have it saying return element greater than or equal to -5. So the every function iterates through the array and asks, is everything greater than or equal to -5, according to this. And as it turns out, the answer is true, because everything is. All of it is, remember, all the elements are just every number between -5 and 5. So -5 is its lowest value, which of course makes everything greater than or equal to -5. So now I have an example here of when it returns false. Once again, I'm using return element greater than 0. And since there happen to be 5 elements here that are not greater than 0, this parameter is not true for every element in this array, and therefore it comes back false. And it's going to come back false even if there's just one element that doesn't match the parameter, but you get the idea. So now I'm going to be demonstrating reverse. This one will take the array and then output it in reverse. So right here I have it. Now it's listed in reverse. Now it's +5 to -5. And now that I've manipulated the array in this way, this is essentially what the array itself is going to be every time I manipulate it from here. So here's the pop variable. So next we're going to talk about the pop function, which will remove the very last element within the array. Now keep in mind, since we reverse the array, that means that now -5 is the last value instead of +5. So down here, when you call the pop function, it's going to tell you which variable ends up getting removed, which is -5. So then after that, I've gone back up here and I've simply just called the original array again to print it out. And now, as you can see, it is the original array, but now it's just missing -5. So that is my demonstrations of the ES6, or some of the ES6 functions for array manipulation. There are a whole lot more out there as well, but I don't have time to cover, literally all of them here in this one video. So next we're going to finally get to this Voca library that I have been hyping up for all this time. Right here in my comments, I have instructions for how you're supposed to, first of all, install the Voca library, because in Visual Studio Code, at least, it's not as simple. For JavaScript, it's not as simple as just, typing this code all the way up here that says, take this library, save it as a variable. As far as I know, there's no way to just directly import into JavaScript codes like you can in Python or C++. So if you plan on doing this yourself, then you'll just have to make sure that you open up the terminal and then type in this command right here, obviously without the quotes. And then that's what will install Voca. And you'll know it worked if over here in the files you have all this extra stuff right here. So package lock, package, node modules. That's a big folder that actually has way too many things in it. But if you have all that showing up, then that's how you know that downloading the Voca library worked. So now that we have the Voca library, I'm going to demonstrate some of its uses. So, like I said, right here is for string manipulation. And if you remember, a string is simply just any collection of characters that is saved into a variable. So, since earlier I called the Voca library and saved it as the variable v, that means that now I can call any function within the Voca library by using v dot and then the function name. So right here I'm using trim, a function that will take the string and then remove any and all unnecessary spaces at the beginning and at the end of the string. So right here in this string, I just have the sentence "I am Iron Man" because I felt like it. And I have, is this 5? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, that's 4 unnecessary spaces at the beginning and at the end. Now, you can't exactly quite see it that obviously down here in the output, but right here I have it printed out, but all those unnecessary spaces are all missing. The spaces in between the words are still there, it's just the ones at the beginning and end. So next I'm going to demonstrate the use of the uppercase function found within Voca, which is going to take every single letter within the string and output them all as uppercase. So right here I have the sentence "your winner," I love this sentence very much. It's hilarious to me. That's why I chose it. And down here I have it outputted now with just in all caps, your winner, something like that. I hope that didn't blast your eardrums off. This microphone can be finicky sometimes. Anyways, over here now we have camel case, which will take the string and then output it in such a way that all spaces between words are removed, and then it will capitalize the first letter of every word except for the first word. Now, I first saw this format as like the means by which most C or C# or C++ programmers will type their variables if they have multiple words in them. Just an uncapitalized first word and then a capitalized second word and every word after that. And so since that's kind of what that reminded me of, I used the sentence how programmers in C type their variables. I originally tried to do how programmers in C++ type their variables, but then the plus plus went missing, so I instead just went with C. There probably is a way to make sure to output plus plus in here using voca.camelcase, but I don't know how to do that. I'll have to do a whole lot more research as far as that goes. The internet's a big place. We all have access to it. I'm sure we can figure it out. So next we have slugify and kebab case, which are actually the same exact thing. Basically, it removes all spaces between words and then replaces them with hyphens. Makes sense as to why it's called kebab case then, because as you could see down here in the output, all the hyphens between the words in the string kind of sort of make it look like a kebab, like they're just skewered on a little wooden stick there. And as far as I can tell, slugify is also the same. I've also noticed that it's uncapitalized every capital letter within the sentences. If there are any differences between slugify and kebab case, I don't know what they are. And then here we have an interesting one, sprintf, which when typed out in actual code kind of sort of looks like sprintf. And I thought it was sprintf for the longest time until I saw a separate one that was vprintf. And then I was like, oh, in that case, it's probably sprintf. But essentially, this one has a number of built-in parameters where it will rearrange the individual like pieces of your string, or it will rearrange multiple strings that you have appropriately according to whatever parameters you have. So right here, I have the word big and then the integer 4, saved as an integer, not as a string because it's outside of quotes, and then the word guys. Now, because I've put modulo D and modulo S on the beginning and end of the big string respectively, it knows to output it in this fashion. Now it's forming a coherent sentence. My next demonstration of sprintf allows you even to utilize special characters with specific syntax. So right here, I want to input this dollar symbol, but you can't simply just put in the dollar symbol. I've also had to put modulo 0.2f afterwards. And for those of you who've seen 0.2f before, most of the time in coding, that's what you do to make sure that whatever numbers it outputs to the second decimal place, which is great if you want to list like monetary prices and stuff, which is exactly what I'm doing in this string right here, which outputs as the sentence, a 12-pack of Mountain Dew costs $4.50. See, there's the dollar symbol. I can put it there because I was able to put it here with the string that has the word costs. So for my final demonstration of sprintf, I also discovered this other neat little function where if you want to output a sentence that has repeated words, what you can do is this little format right here, modulo number dollar symbol s, and then depending on how you order the words right there, that's how it's going to output. So right here, all I needed to type in was simply O, captain, and my. But because of the way that this works, it knows, okay, O was 1, captain is 2 over here and 2 over here, and my is 3. So therefore it outputs as the title to the famous poem, O Captain, My Captain. Funnily enough, when I was looking up example codes for how to write this, one I found that used this specific format of sprintf decided to do the opening lyrics to the hit TV show Cops, which, if you don't know, says, bad boys, what you gonna do? I thought that was pretty funny. So now we move on to recursion, the last part of my JavaScript demonstration here. And for anyone who's familiar with advanced coding, you know that recursion simply just refers to a function calling itself. And because it's calling itself, it is therefore telling itself to do its thing, which will eventually lead to it calling itself. So one big important thing to remember when doing recursive functions is that there has to be some sort of end point or breaking point where it's not going to call itself anymore, or else it's just going to call itself infinitely, and then your computer's going to like explode or something. So right here, I created a very basic recursion function that will essentially act as a timer. So here's the beginning of the function. Right here is where where it will just output itself each time it lists a number. And then and then even though it passes the variable time right here into the function, every time it calls itself, I have this right here where it's instead going to use the next variable and have that equal whatever this time variable is -1. And then there's an if statement right here that says if next is greater than or equal to 0, this is when timer is going to call itself again, but with whatever number was passed into the next variable. So then next becomes new time, and then it's going to call itself again and just keep subtracting 1 every time until it hits 0, according to this if statement right here. So here's my timer function, and then I have right here demonstrating it by calling it with the number 10 to serve as the time variable. So now we have all numbers counting down from 10 to 0 down here in the output. Now, as I was doing this, I did notice that you could essentially do this very same thing with a for loop. But at the same time, those of us who have worked with for loops know that every single time if I were to call it, like if I wanted to do a 10-second, a 5-second, and a 30-second timer respectively, I would have to rewrite the entire for loop over and over and over, but just with those parameters in case. And that is something you can avoid by using recursive functions. So because I have a function that just calls itself over and over again anyways, just like a loop would, I can simply just call that function over and over again, but with different parameters. So rather than writing for loops like 3 different times, I can instead simply just call timer 10 different times right here. So I have my 10-second timer, as I displayed right here, counts down from 10 to 0. Here, let me move this up a little bit more. Okay. And then we have the 5-second timer, which counts down from 5 to 0. And then lastly, there's the 30-second timer. Starts at 30, goes all the way down to 0. So this definitely seems to work. This is a good, well-written recursive function, though I am probably biased since I kind of wrote this myself. So there we have it. That was my basic tutorial of a number of features found within JavaScript, and I hope you all have a good day.